but we're not prepared for this, and we better hope that we start getting our mind right and our head right quickly, because we're not going to be prepared for the onslaught that could come and the amount of firepower. We're already losing the fentanyl battle.
Yep.
The reality is we have a border problem and we got to fix it.
Sheriff Mark Lamb, America's Sheriff. Dude, I've watched you on television. I've watched you with Fridays with Frank. You know, what is your problem, dude? Do you really tick Frank off? Because it's like you want to give everybody breaks, it seems like. And it seems like Frank gets a little upset.
Frank's always writing tickets. And first of all, how did I end up having to compete with the debate tonight? Look.
I know. Hey, it's all about availability, I guess, man.
Right? Well, I should have brought Frank. Then we would have certainly won the ratings battle.
No, you guys are going to do just fine tonight. What time do you hit the stage?
I'm not sure what time tonight. I know the event. I think the doors open around 5:45. We've got a little VIP thing going on before that. And then we're hitting the stage, I don't know, maybe 6:37. I don't know.
How long are you speaking for?
I think about 30 minutes.
Okay, then you take the whole crowd and you all come over to the flag.
To the watch party.
We have a beautiful building, beautiful studios, TVs everywhere, free food, free beverages, if you know what I mean. Come on over when you're all done. Bring the whole crew with you. Steve and Scott are going to kill me now. They're like, are you serious, Jay? Come on, man. What's that, Ronnie?
6:15.
He's talking. 6:15. All right, there you go. Also, I've had you on my program in studio before. You're back in town. FBI. Are you still technically on suspension? So you're still FBI agent?
Yeah, technically, just indefinitely suspended forever without pay. So.
Garret, old Boyle, the FBI whistleblower who took it to Congress, said, "Hey, this is the garbage that's going on." I mean, true American. You're a true American. Cass County Sheriff Jesse. Did you give him one of your patches?
I'll have to grab him one.
Oh, for the love of God.
He's given me one before.
Okay, all right. So you have one.
He's given me one before.
Guys, I don't even know where to start. I want to promote the event this evening, but I mean, you are down on the front line, Sheriff.
Yeah.
I've got a buddy down in Texas, the Del Rio sector. He's got a 7,500-acre ranch down there, beautiful ranch. It's gotten to the point down there where he won't even allow his wife or kids anymore on the ranch. It has gotten so bad. Yeah. He is spending so much time and so much money constantly having to fix fence lines, and now he's got his ranch hands. They're all out there with backpacks, with food, energy bars, water. He says, look, I got to be humane. He said, I can't just let people die on my land. But he says it has gotten so bad, the amount of illegals that show up on his land, the destruction that they're causing. And it's to the point now, he says, when you're on my land, he said the sheriff and border patrol are all telling him, don't touch anything. You don't know if it's fentanyl in there. He said he was out one time with some of the border patrol, and they were pointing up saying, see that, see that, see that. That's all cartel up there watching their stuff. How true is that for you?
Oh, it's all very true. We've been chasing scouts around our mountaintops, and mind you, the border, I'm 52 miles off the border on one end of my county where the Indian reservation is that runs all the way into Mexico, so it's on both sides.
Yeah.
And basically, we become the first line of defense as soon as they come off the reservation. And then you've got 71 miles off the border on the I-10. That's the main artery. Anybody that comes in through, we're in the Tucson sector, which comprises of 4 counties.
Okay.
Cochise County, Pima County, Santa Cruz County. Anybody that comes through those areas has to come through my county to get to Phoenix.
And you're Pinal.
Yes, I'm the choke point into Phoenix.
Okay.
And so whether it's through the desert or whether it's in a vehicle, we pull over vehicles every day. We have pursuits almost every day with people dressed in camouflage clothes that the cartels are trafficking. All those gotaways you hear about, those people that give up, all those gotaways you hear about, that's why you have scouts in the mountains. Because those gotaways you hear about, that's who the cartel wants to bring in without being detected by the police or by the RIP crews.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly tracing scouts out of the mountains. And we were the first county in the country to successfully charge cartel scouts for being in the mountaintops.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think the government won't do anything about this? They know what's going on. They're sitting here lying to the American people. And they just allow this to happen day in and day out. They won't give you the help you need. I feel for the border agents down here because it's not them. They're taking orders from Washington. They're just doing what they're told to do. It's got to be frustrating for them, too.
Look, the hard truth is this is intentional. You know, people don't like to hear that. They don't believe that their government could be capable of being intentional on this.
Well,
but it is very intentional. Look, I thought maybe in the beginning it was incompetence, maybe it was ignorance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the end, I quickly realized this was very intentional. And look, the alternative, you know, I could guess what their plan is, but at the end, we have people that are allowing people to come into this country. You know, I just saw something today that just kind of sparked a memory where, you know, you had they were pushing so hard for Americans to get vaccinated or else you would lose your job.
Yeah.
Yet they've let 15 million people into this country and never once questioned their vaccination, and they're all unemployed.
Well, here's what the wife and I were talking about the other day, and that is, you know, you talk about the vaccinations, they're still pushing this real ID. We have to have this by May of 2025, this coming year. But yet you can come into the country illegally, get on a plane, no ID, but yet we're forced to have these real IDs.
Not only that,
unbelievable.
They'll give you paperwork like this that you have in front of you that doesn't have a picture or anything. It just has a court date for 2030 or 2032. And then they put them on a plane to places like Fargo, to places like Springfield, Ohio, where they're now eating people's cats.
Oh, have you seen that?
I mean,
that town has had it. 20,000 Haitians brought into that town, and the town's like, we're done.
And I want to make a real strong point, because this is not a political thing. This is I'm trying to protect
safety.
Americans. Whatever I don't catch that comes in through my county ultimately will end up throughout the rest of America. They don't stay in my county. They're going to go throughout the rest of America, including places like right here in Fargo or other places in North Dakota or Chicago or New York or Alabama or anywhere that they can put them. I talked to a sheriff out in Kansas, 12,000 people in one of his towns, 1,000 illegals. I mean, I think that Springfield, Ohio, they say that there's 20,000 Haitians in a town with 60,000 people.
Aurora, Colorado. Look what's going on there. And you got a governor in Colorado that sat there and denied, oh, this is nothing. This is a city council woman. Just, you know, she's just trying to get people all stirred up. No, that's the Venezuelan gang in there taking over buildings to the point finally where they did bring the police in, they did arrest them, and they told the property owners, you're selling that property or you're going to pay these massive fines. This denial's got to stop. Cass County Sheriff Jesse Jahner, you've been on my program many times. We've talked about what's going on in the northern border. And Mark, one of the things you're going to talk about tonight, Sheriff, is look, you can sit up here in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, and go, what the hell? This is not a southern border. This is an American issue. We have people by the hundreds, if not thousands, dying from fentanyl. We are watching absolutely heinous crimes happening in this country by these illegals that are coming in here. And we don't even know the true number. Jesse, out in Absaraka, we had a problem.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to go to Sheriff Lamb's point here, I mean, obviously he's dealing with it right down on the border. As he mentioned, stuff is trickling up into our area. I've been on your show, like you mentioned before, talking about the effects of that. What we're seeing here is really the narcotics trafficking that's coming up from the southern border, and that's really affecting our community. And my concern with that is obviously public safety, but the fact that it's really putting strains on our infrastructure here in Cass County, because as we all know, a majority of the people in my jail are in there for addiction and mental health issues, okay? That starts from the narcotics being trafficked into our community, people becoming addicted to those, and then, like I said, having addiction issues and mental health issues. That leads to criminal activity, whether it's people stealing from others to support their narcotics habit because they can't keep a regular job, or the violence that comes with it. And that's what's filling up our jail right now. We all know in Cass County, our jail is full over capacity. Yep. I'm adding another pod onto our jail. And so that's when I talk about that infrastructure piece, that's what's ultimately happening from no security on the border and not being able to openly flow into the United States.
Can I tie that in?
Yeah, definitely.
Because Arizona tends to be is where the majority of the fentanyl that comes into this country. So any fentanyl you have here in Fargo or anywhere up in northern United States, that's coming through the Arizona borders. So last year, the DEA seized about 78 million fentanyl pills.
Jeez.
Almost 50 million of those pills were caught in Arizona. well over 50% of all fentanyl that is seized in the United States
Comes
is
through your
seized in
state?
Arizona. We either seize it or it's coming through our state. So ultimately, we feel that responsibility because what we don't catch now affects communities here in North Dakota, Fargo, all over the place.
And like I mentioned before, Jay, I mean, purchasing fentanyl down on the southern border, it's going to be a lot cheaper than when it gets to Fargo, and narcotics traffickers know that. They know that there's a profit to be made when they get it into Fargo because it's not as readily available. So, like I mentioned, purchasing a fentanyl pill for $8 to $10 a pill here, a lot more than
50 cents to $2
on the border.
Most.
So you
and
can
then they're
see
taking that, bringing it up here and making a fortune and killing people.
and that's just locally. If we go to our reservations here in North Dakota, $60 to $80 a pill.
Wow.
So there's a huge profit margin to be made, and these narcotics traffickers know that, and that's really where it's affecting our community. And then, like you mentioned, we talked about some northern border, and we're starting to get more activity up there. Of course, I'm not right on the northern border.
No, but you got to be hooked up with the sheriff.
But I've
up
had
there,
obviously sheriffs up there that I know very well that are dealing with issues there. So
Okay, so now I want to bring in FBI agent Garret O'Boyle. Garret, when it comes to what we're talking about, you were FBI, man. I mean, I've said this for the longest time, and many others are saying it. We're talking about the cartels and the drugs that are coming across, but we got some real bad dudes that are coming across, and it's not a matter of if, it's when, and it's going to be bad. How concerned should we be that there are people that have got across that border that were not tagged on the terrorist watch list, and when it's time to let it loose, they're going to let it loose?
Well, I think we should be very concerned about that. And from the FBI side of things, it can get a little more nuanced because they claim and they try to be a little bit focused on like a terrorist watch list, something like that. Just in August, they arrested this guy named Asif Merchant, who they let in. They let him get like a one-time pass, essentially, to be allowed in, and then they arrested him because he was allegedly planning to assassinate politicians here. And it's like, why'd you even bother letting the guy in then? But it was so he could further hatch his plan with undercover agents in the FBI. And for them, it was so they could make a press release.
Sounds like Fast and Furious.
It's exactly like that.
And look, I talked to an FBI, our main FBI guy down in Arizona, and he said, Sheriff, we typically have a pretty good grasp on the terrorist watch list. Mm-hmm. They let them in. They kind of monitor them. Sure. He goes, we're probably more concerned about the secondary and the tertiaries. So let me put that into perspective. Anybody who knows about, let's say, biker gangs in this country, you have patched members, then you have prospects, and you have hang-arounds.
Hang-arounds, yeah.
Typically, your prospects and your hang-arounds who are not official members of the gang yet will do more work, put in more work.
Yeah, you got to put in your work.
And so the secondary and tertiary guys that aren't on the terrorist watch list are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the people that might be on the terrorist watch list because they know they're being watched by the FBI.
Well, and Jay, we get these, us as sheriffs and local law enforcement, we get these intel bulletins from the federal government at different times that, most definitely we've seen an increase in the amount of concern and alerts for the people that they're monitoring. So,
Agent O'Boyle, it's all over the country, right? Like we were talking, this isn't a southern border thing. I mean, this is all of America should be concerned about this.
Right. At any port of entry, they can come in. And then, too, like Sheriff Lamb's talking about, what about the ones that aren't on some list? What about the ones we don't know? But instead, to really further show more of the weaponization, then you get somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard. She gets put on a watch list.
Yeah.
But what about the actual criminals that we should be watching? They're oftentimes they're slipping through the cracks and nobody's monitoring them. And then you have like a July 13th type of incident happen because that guy's not being watched. Granted, I know he wasn't an immigrant, but still.
Well, and I think we as Americans have been conditioned. You mentioned Joseph Merchant, or sometimes we think of these people only being Middle Easterners. To me, one of the greatest threats we're facing right now, the majority of the deaths that are happening, that's the leading cause of death in America amongst the ages of 18 to 45 is fentanyl poisoning. That's coming from China. Yep. China puts it in the hands of the cartels. The cartels then bring it across the border, and it ends up into the hands of Americans, and then Americans are losing loved ones. And no enemy has ever had success killing Americans like they are from the what China is bringing in this country. And then you have to ask yourself, how did we get 37,000 Chinese nationals, almost all military age men last year? And how did we get up to, we're probably going to double that number this year? I have a guy who's shown me the messages on these phones that they discard when they come across the border. And we as Americans should be very concerned. And I don't think the FBI has shifted their focus to the Chinese nationals that are coming in here like they should have.
Why do you think the FBI is not focusing or shifting their focus to that issue? Because you can't just say, if you live in China, you can't just one day go, I'm leaving, I'm going to America.
Exactly.
You can't just leave. So that government's allowing, you're right, these fighting age men to leave, and they're coming through that, what is it, the Darien Gap? Is that where they're coming through?
They're coming through the Darien Gap, and there's NGOs that we fund sitting there waiting to accept them and help them get up here. And now Mexico's saying, we're going to take them from the border of Mexico on the south, and we're going to drop them off right at the border of the United States.
Why do you think the FBI is dropping the ball on this, or just not focusing on this?
I think a huge part of it is because of how politicized they've become. So they've long touted now that January 6th is their biggest investigation ever.
Yeah.
And so it's low-hanging fruit. They did a massive geofence in the D.C. area, and they're going to be able to find anybody who was in and around the Capitol on that day, and they're going for them. Just last night, I was in Minnesota. I gave a little speech at a VFW there, and afterwards, some of the people were talking to me and said, one of our friends, he was wanting to come tonight. The two FBI agents showed up at his house just within the last week.
Really?
They showed up to his house about 3.5 years ago, right when this all started, and now they just showed up again.
Again?
And they're telling me he's really worried. I'm like, yeah, he should be, and he shouldn't talk to them. Because that's the FBI. They have shifted the focus to focus on Americans more than external threats. I'm not saying they aren't entirely not focusing on external threats, but it's easier to find some person who was at January 6th and get that low-hanging fruit, because also it's like a notch on their belt, because inside the FBI, because it's gotten so corrupted and it's so politicized that if you build your career off of January 6th cases, you're gonna
skyrocket
to the top. Where if you're working really hard trying to find some of these Chinese nationals that are coming across, that's going to be an intensive, time-consuming case. If you can get a phone like the sheriff was talking about that they just discard, that's going to help you tremendously. But where'd they go after they discarded the phone? So that's going to be a difficult case to work. But it's a case that is needed.
It's got to be worked.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you said the messages are just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, the messages are unbelievable. It's a coordinated effort many times.
What do you think their outcome, or what is the outcome they want? Because, we talk about, terrorists, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Jesse, but we talk about, anytime we talk about an incident, terrorist attack going to happen in America, we go back, and tomorrow's the anniversary of 9/11. We go back to 9/11, but we're in a different world now. I don't necessarily think a terrorist attack is going to be, buildings blowing up in cities. I think it's going to be more of a cyber, something like that. I mean, take down the power. Can you imagine if the power grid is taken down in this country?
They're killing. And 9/11, and not to diminish the loss of any of those lives, we lost about 3,600 Americans. We lost 100,000 plus Americans last year to fentanyl. I don't Americans don't seem to want to open their eyes to, because we visualize terrorist threats in a much different manner.
Yeah.
But without firing a single shot or setting off a single bomb,
they're killing Americans.
They're killing Americans.
Jesse, how concerned are you up here? I mean, what happened here just over a year ago in Fargo, that I call it a terrorist attack. That dude was a terrorist, man. He may not have been tied to any groups, but what he did was an act of terrorism.
Oh, most definitely. And yeah, I mean, we think of that. That's one of the worst things that a law enforcement official can think about on a day-to-day basis, right, is a mass casualty situation. Mm-hmm. And so we constantly, train, think of those types of scenarios. But yeah, I mean, when we don't know who's necessarily coming into the country, we don't know where that could happen. It could happen anywhere. So we have to be on high alert all the time and be prepared to respond to something like that.
How much, without, of course, you're not going to give detail because, that's intel you don't want the public to know. But I got to believe for you as well as you, Sheriff Lamb, that the training that your officers are given now and what they do on the streets and how they, approach on the street, it's got to be a whole different different world now.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case. We've started looking at how can we prepare for some of those mass casualty situations, whether it's through what resources do we have the appropriate resources to respond, and then, like you said, the training, the tactical piece. So, we talk about that on a regular basis now when we have our large events, such as events like this, the fair. We're constantly preparing, and I know in the past we've showed you some of that preparation that we've done out here, but it's a constant, idea within our organization that this could happen any place, anytime, and we just need to be prepared for it.
Same thing for you, Sheriff Lamb?
Well, look at us on the southern border. We're dealing with the cartels. Look at the firepower the cartels have been able to amass. They went from making $500 million a year
to billions,
to $13 billion plus a year. Could be much more. They're transnational organizations. They're in 54 different countries. The sheriff was talking about the difference of the price of fentanyl between here and Arizona. Take the price of methamphetamines in the United States, $800,000 a pound. It's $90,000 a pound in Europe.
Wow.
So these are transnational criminal organizations. Our inability to fight them and to stop their business of trafficking humans and drugs has only made them so powerful. I mean, they have armies that take over towns in Mexico. They're currently, just yesterday, I heard of a town in Mexico that is completely locked down and under the control of the cartels right now. What's stopping them from flowing into the United States? My men have pistols and AR-15s. Mm-hmm. These people are dropping pipe bombs on each other from drones.
And that right there, I am so sick and tired of you hear from people out there. Why are our law enforcement agencies? Why are they armed to the teeth? Why do they look like they're military? People don't understand. You just said it. You don't understand what law enforcement is having to deal with out there. These aren't thugs running around with pea shooters. They got some real artillery, and law enforcement needs to be able to be able to counteract that.
Well, you know what your pistol's for, right?
What?
To get you back to your rifle.
There you
Look,
go.
The rifle is a far more superior weapon. Yeah. And as a citizen, I want my law enforcement to be equipped to deal with whatever problems in this country. And going back just real quick, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI have deemed it the American people as the greatest threat. I've heard it come out of their mouths at the major county sheriff's conferences. So they're not focused on the right thing. I have questioned Director Ray personally, but we're not prepared for this. And we better hope that we start getting our mind right and our head right quickly, because we're not going to be prepared for the onslaught that could come and the amount of firepower. We're already losing the fentanyl battle. Yep. I mean, I'm not a pessimist, but we have some.
You got to live in reality.
The reality is we have a border problem. We got to fix it because it's affecting the rest of the country, and it's really putting us at risk with Venezuelan gangs, Chilean gangs robbing people's houses, the cartels killing Americans with fentanyl that comes from China. You've got Middle Easterners that are coming into this country by the thousands. I mean, we have last year alone, I think there was 700 Iranians that came in. I mean, look, the numbers are off the chart.
Yeah. And look, I mean, everybody's welcome in America if you do it legally. And that's not what is happening. That's not happening. And you said, going back to what Sheriff Lamb said, the problem is, Agent Boyle, is that the focus, they're not focusing. You said, hey, I can make a career out of January 6th. That's done. It's over. Move on. Don't go to a school board meeting and start harassing parents or somebody that was at an abortion. I mean, come on. You've got to start going after. Now, is it the boots on the ground, the agents that are out there doing their job? It's not them. They're getting orders from the higher ups in the ivory towers in Washington, right?
Yeah. So I've kind of shifted on this in the last couple of years since I've been suspended, because all the guys and girls who are FBI agents, like I was, they see the same type of stuff I saw when I was in there, and probably a lot more now. Like Sheriff Lamb said, these agencies have announced what the biggest threat is. It is the American people. The FBI's number one threat this fiscal year is domestic violent extremism. That's January 6th. That's people in the hinterlands of North Dakota and wherever else who are the FBI will say, oh, they're a militia. And that's a domestic terrorism issue now. And they're not focused on the right issues. And so I actually had an agent within the past month or two call me, one of the few who still reaches out. And he said, man, every time I go to try to investigate something, I stop at a sheriff's office or a police department. And as soon as I show them my creds, like, you can tell that they don't want anything to do with me. And I was like, do you blame them?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I don't, but it makes my job harder. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe you should start blowing the whistle too.
Yeah, exactly.
I did a federal RICO case about against on an Indian reservation against a very violent gang that was on the reservation. And we went to the FBI and we said, hey, we could use some federal help on this case. They said, well, we could probably arrest, 10 of these people. It's going to take us 2-3 years to put the case together. They arrested 900 people that were present on January 6th in the first year.
Yeah, but they can't go after the
They'll
true
spend
criminals.
millions of dollars and they will do years of investigations to arrest a couple people. That's typically how the FBI works. But then, I mean, just look at the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, when you had to deal with the feds, with the illegals that were out in Absirac, I mean, you got the runaround for a while.
Yep. Nope. I definitely ran into a roadblock, and I think most of our listeners know about that because we talked about it. But yeah, I mean, when I reached out to Border Patrol, there was, several days where they didn't get back to me. Really what I was looking for, through their help was to be able to identify who these individuals were who were out there, because, Border Patrol, HSI, they've got access to look up people's histories a little better than we do. And so I was really looking for that and help in identify those people and then to be able to communicate with them. But yeah, no, definitely ran into a roadblock there. HSI was a little bit more cooperative with us. Mm-hmm. They did end up coming out to the residence with me and assisting through the investigation. But yeah, definitely ran into roadblocks with Border Patrol. And the answer I was given was just that they're overwhelmed right now, that they don't have enough agents up on the north side here, that a number of them are being sent down south. That was eventually the answer I got, but it took a while to get that answer.
Let's talk about child trafficking. How bad is it?
Well, the government has admitted they don't know where at least probably 100,000+ of those kids. Now they estimate that number of what the government is downplaying it.
Yeah.
A recent thing's now saying it could be over 300,000.
Yeah, because originally wasn't it like 70 to 80,000?
Well, they said
that
85, but that was October of last year.
And that was a whistleblower that got that rolling too. She brought that up.
Well, what they're doing is even Border Patrol, when these kids are coming across, there's about 140,000 unaccompanied minors that are coming across right now. Look, I was flying my helicopter on the border and we saw this huge group of people coming across. So we look and we see they're mostly kids. So we land our helicopter and it was 3 women and 50 children.
Okay. What's that tell you?
I mean, they were all over. The women they were only responsible for 1 or 2 or 3 of the kids.
Yeah.
All the other kids.
What do you do in that situation? What happens?
Well, Border Patrol takes them, and then now all these kids typically come with a piece of paper that they're written down, or it's written on their arm or something, where they were going to go to a certain address. That address, you'll have hundreds or if not thousands of kids going to the same address, and Border Patrol agents are alerting and saying, "Hey, like these kids are all going to the same address. Hey, put your head down and keep working.
Yeah,
just do your job. Don't worry about that piece."
And nobody's going back from the government to check on these kids.
Look, Dr. Phil recently, pointed out at all the kids that have gone missing, and they've shown kids that are now actually ended up in the hard labor, or they're in the sex trafficking industry in this country
in
America. I had a reporter one day, we were talking about the Remain in Mexico, and he said, when I was telling him, hey, you got to restore that, he goes, well, then they're going to be in the hands of the cartels. And I said, are you honestly naive enough to think that the second they cross over, that doesn't happen anymore?
Yeah, they're in the hands.
Frankly, the ones who owe the cartels are in the cartels' hands more than what they were before they ran into the cartels.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up real quick, too, is I don't think people realize this. These people that are coming across the border, they are now indebted to the cartel for a lot of money, which means the cartel is in America operating, doing business.
And, you know, and we can talk about that, but I want to go back to the kids because I think that's really important is the children are being used as pawns. Some are being sold to the cartels for money. Some are being stolen by the cartels. Some are their parents die on the way. And some, frankly, I don't know what goes through some parents' head. They decide, I'm going to send my child to the border on their own. And now you have this epidemic of children. You know, back when, in the previous administration, they were making a big deal of these kids being in cages. Which wasn't the truth. They were embellishing that.
Yep.
Not one of them has said anything about the fact that the children, 100,000, 300,000 children, are now in the hand. We don't know where they're at. Now in the hands of the cartels. And when Dr. Phil went on the View, not that I watched that show, I saw it. I don't want anybody listening to think that I watched the show.
All right, thanks for being on the program, Sheriff.
Right.
You're done this afternoon.
But Dr. Phil says this. He says, hey, these children are being trafficked, some are being hard labor, some are sex trade. And one of the hosts said, now, is it all of them or just some of them?
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, if this,
it's like that's your mentality.
We have gotten in this place where politics is trumping decency, human decency.
Yeah.
Let me tell anybody out there, shouldn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, if you care about humanity, human beings, then you should absolutely care about a closed border, a secure border, because the cartels are abusing women, raping women, leaving them for dead in the desert. They're using children as pawns. They're putting children in the sex trade here in this country. And if you don't believe me, let me give you one statistic. In 2014, the NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, had 4 million reports of new child sexual abuse material, CSAM, which is either a child portrayed as being nude or a child being raped on video or a picture. And we had 4 million plus cases of that in 2014. Do you know what it was last year?
What?
32 million new cases of CSAM in this country, child sexual abuse.
And we are, Sheriff Jahner, we are seeing it happen up here constantly where adults are getting busted for child pornography. It's like, what is going on? It's got to be tied to this, some of it.
We've definitely seen an increase. And as you know, we've put someone on our ICAC task force, which is our Internet Crimes Against Children task force. And through putting someone on that's really opened our eyes to the amount of child exploitation that's going on. And so, it's my detective that is on that task force cannot keep up at this point. In fact, I just visited with her a little while ago here over the last few weeks, and I mean the amount of caseload that she has right now is ridiculous. So, and we probably, from the stuff that he just mentioned, that some of that stuff's pretty alarming. Some of that stuff I didn't even know. I mean, like he mentioned, where are all these children going? If we don't know, and that presents opportunities. That presents opportunities for people that are trying to exploit children. Up here, besides our ICAC task force that I talked about, really what we're seeing more up here is the sex trafficking and labor trafficking.
You're seeing more and more.
That's what we're seeing more, and those are the cases that I've been involved in.
And look, we have the same thing, but we're so overwhelmed with the child trafficking and the child abuse and the child exploitation. I have to make that a priority.
Yeah.
I don't have enough detectives to go after even the adults that are being trafficked for the sex crimes. That tends to fall, and the cartels know this. They know there's so much emphasis on the children, the internet crimes against children, and the amount of children being flooded into our country that we can't even focus on the amount of women that are being trafficked. Here's what the cartel understands. How many times can the cartel sell you a pill?
Over and over.
Well, they sell you a pill once. If you take it, it's gone.
Yeah.
How many times can they sell you a woman or a child?
Over and over.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
And they understand that. They understand that they can make more money off of a human being being trafficked across our open borders than they do for drugs.
Good Lord, man.
It's crazy.
Agent O'Boyle, what needs to happen? I mean, your FBI, man, law enforcement, years, military, what needs to happen?
Well, I think number one, it goes to a deeper problem. Sheriff Lamb said in 2014 the number of CSAM was 4 million new images. 10 years later, it's 32 million. That shows how desperately sick and wicked the heart of Americans are. So there's a deeper problem in our nation. So number one, we need to turn back to God. We need to repent as a nation. Yes. Because in 10 years, that's how pervasive this sexual deviancy with children has become. It's abhorrent.
It's almost like you hear these numbers, guys, and it's almost like Americans are just, they just think this is normal. There's nothing wrong with this. It's sick. It's disturbing. I mean, again, it's almost on a daily basis up here where there's somebody's been busted for child pornography.
They're being clouded by politics. And then when people like me stand up and say something about it, I'm labeled the person that is the person who seems...
Yeah, you're the evil guy.
Like, I'm not... Look, I could care less what political party you are. It is not okay to rape women. It is not okay to traffic children. It is not okay to kill Americans with fentanyl poisoning. None of that is okay. It is not okay to extort men, which is what's happening on the border. It is not okay to leave people for dead in the desert. It's not okay to cut people's ranchers' fences and leave trash on their property. None of this is okay. No. And I don't care if it's viewed as political. I will shout it from the rooftops.
Good for you.
This is not okay.
Good for you. Are you seeing more and more law enforcement in a position like yours, whether it's a sheriff or it might be now starting to speak up, police chiefs going, okay, you know what? I've been quiet long enough. I've got to stand up like Sheriff Lamb is, and I got to start screaming from the rooftop that this crap's got to end.
A little bit more, but what I'm seeing is we're all overwhelmed. They've punched holes in our boats, and we're all bailing water out of our own boats. So Sheriff is up here is overwhelmed with human trafficking and drugs, and I'm overwhelmed with trafficking in my communities and people coming in and fentanyl. And I mean, we're all just tasked to the max right now. And now you've let all these potential criminals and people with bad intentions into our country. It is creating a lot of work for local law enforcement. The feds don't respond to 911 calls.
No,
local law enforcement.
You guys do.
So whatever problems they create for us, we have to pick up and clean up the mess at the very end.
What is, and I'm saying Trump, I'm not saying Harris, because if Harris for some chance gets in office, God help us all. But if she does, she ain't going to do anything. She can talk all she wants. She's a flip-flopper. She ain't going to do squat.
Look, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Exactly. Sure. Trump gets in office. He's been screaming day one, it's going to be the biggest mass deportation you've ever seen in American history, which we know that's not going to happen. You just can't. You can't. You're not going to get it done day one. What needs to be done when Trump gets in office? Where does he start, Sheriff?
Well, first of all, feelings can't matter anymore.
That's right.
I mean, look, we have to protect American lives, and we've got to do what's right. And we're so worried about hurting people's feelings or fitting in some DEI garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's killing this country. Look, we're going to have to make some. They have made this problem so bad that we have hard times ahead of us. We need people that are going to make hard decisions. That's what we do as leaders. We make hard decisions. You've got to shut the border down. You have got to restore the Remain in Mexico program. You have got to hold people accountable if they break our law and come into this country illegally, whether they're a good person or not. They broke the law in this country.
Yep.
We don't accept that. They have to be held accountable. You've got to finish the wall. You've got to put extreme circumstances on people who traffic drugs and kill people with fentanyl.
I've always said the fentanyl thing, why can't that be treated as a weapon of mass destruction? Because that's what it is.
You've got to declare the cartels the terrorists that they are, because then you can actually use military force to deal with them. I'm not saying you don't do it without Mexico. Mexico will be a willing partner if they know they have a willing partner.
Yeah.
But right now, Mexico says, you guys don't have the heart to do what
you're not doing anything. Yeah, we're not because they're going to take the cartels on by themselves. And let's be honest, Mexican government ain't going to win that fight.
Most Americans don't realize our failure to secure our southern border and our horrific policies that relates to the border have created a problem in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Panama, in Ecuador, in Brazil, and all over the country. We have created problems because people are now flooding to those countries and then making their way up to America, which is having an impact on those countries as well. Look, the extent is so deep. I mean, it's...
And I would say the same thing. I mean, the first thing we need to do is get the border secured. We need to shut that off. And then after that, it's enforce rule of law, which, I mean, we've got the laws on the books. We just need to enforce them. I think that's where a lot of people get confused with, some of the politics of this, and that is that, well, there was a bill on the table to pass, and it never got passed. Well, that's because there's a lot of other things in there. The primary focus needs to be the border without a bunch of other policies attached to it, right? Just to focus on the border, a bill on the border, and then enforce the laws that are on the books, the rule of law, to get an initial handle on that influx of what's coming in. And then once that's done, then you got to start focusing the efforts on locating the individuals that shouldn't be here, the narcotics traffickers, the sex traffickers, the child traffickers, and focus on those.
Agent O'Boyle, Trump gets in office. Does him going in and cleaning house, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, all these agencies, and when I'm talking cleaning house, you're going up to the head honchos of these agencies. You're done. Does that help day one?
I think it'll help. It goes back to what Sheriff Lamb said about feelings have to not matter.
Aren't flies fantastic? This is crazy, man.
You have to put people in charge of these agencies that are there to get the job done. They're not there for this 30 and 30 program or whatever other DEI-centric policy that's in place right now.
Put cops and agents. No more lawyers at the heads of these agencies. They're bureaucrats and technocrats. Mm-hmm. They're not traditional agents. They're not guys who have spent their career fighting crime. They're lawyers.
Right. Lawyers, accountants, teachers. Yeah. I mean, you name it. And maybe I'm biased because I was a cop in a past life, but in my experience, save for, there's always outliers, right? But the vast majority of the best agents that I ever worked with were cops before they were agents. And look at how the FBI started. It started by pulling cops and detectives and marshals, and that's how the agency initially began. Yeah. And then sending them after the worst of the worst who were doing interstate crimes.
Yep.
And the FBI has gotten very far away from that. And we were talking about it on the break. They like to sit in the building and collect their nice paycheck, and they don't like to go do their work, and it takes 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm aware of some cases that have been open for more than 10 years.
Wow.
And which that would be on the national security side, but that brings home a bigger point because Sheriff Lamb mentioned it too, and you've heard talk of this for years now where these cartels need to be labeled as terrorist institutions, terrorist organizations. They're assassinating politicians in Mexico. I don't know the current number, but it's a couple dozen. That's terrorism. Yeah. And then they're sending fentanyl and then the human trafficking bit.
That's terrorism.
That's terrorism. Because you tell me, or you get one of those children that have been trafficked, their life, good luck, because they have lived a life of terror. And so that could also help. President Trump gets into office, or I would say, or whoever, but we already know that you only have one option with this issue.
Exactly.
And he's got to do what he can to label these institutions terrorist organizations, because in a way, and I have some issues with like the national terrorism playbook that the FBI uses. There's some issues there for sure. But if you label MS-13 as a terrorist entity, that opens up a whole new playbook for how to attack them.
Sure.
With our legal side.
They just need that label, whether it's the cartels, these vicious gangs. Once they get that label, they're officially considered a terrorist organization. That changes the game.
Yeah. But in the end, look, you can, if you walk into your bathroom and it's flooded with water, you grab a mop. I don't care how long and how hard you mop. Until you turn off the tub water, you will never dry that floor.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the first thing you have to do is stop the problem. Stop the problem. Messaging day one will matter. Messaging not only will stop people from flowing into this country, because the messaging is what brought them here.
That's right.
The lack of or the failure to strongly message against it. And the messaging, look at Texas. When they messaged and said, we're going to hold you accountable, their numbers dropped.
Yep.
And then the messaging against people who are already here, a lot of these people will self-deport.
They're going to go, I'm out of here.
They're going to go, I'm out.
Yep.
And the jobs aren't here. The economy's not great anyway, because frankly, I mean, you can't keep letting the third world come in here and not expect that you won't become a third world country yourself.
No, exactly. I got to tell you, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure.